I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the Tuesday, June 28th, 2011 Environmental Safety and Toxic Material Committee hearing. I'd like to ask the Sergeant to call all the absent members. Welcome. This is our last scheduled legislative hearing this year for the committee. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Wachowski.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
Campos. Here. Chesbro. Here. Davis. Fuhrer. Lowenthal. Morrell. Valadao.
Here.
All right, a quorum has been established. I'd like to note that item number 4, Senate Bill 589 by Senator Lowenthal, has been pulled by the author. With that, the first order of business is the consent calendar. There are 2 items. There's a motion by Mr. Valadao, second by Mr. Miller. This is Senate Bill 607 by Ms. Walters and Senate Bill 935, number 9 on our calendar, which is from the Senate Environmental Quality Committee. Please call the roll.
Wachowski.
Here. Aye.
Wachowski, aye. Miller.
Aye.
Miller, aye. Campos. Aye. Campos, aye. Chesbro. Aye. Chesbro, aye. Davis. Fuhrer. Lowenthal. Morrell. Valadao.
Aye.
Valadao, aye.
That's 5-zip. Those matters are out. Now I'd like to move to the regular order of business, but we have no senators here to. So we'll take matters. Normally we take them in file order, but we're going to make an exception today. We're going to do first come, first serve. So as soon as we have a senator, we will go to that bill.
Yeah, absolutely.
If nothing else.
Absolutely. It's
We don't get them back, we'll start getting them.
Well, I meant, prospective. Not retrospective, yeah.
stop the bleeding. Stop the bleeding. Exactly.
All right. I'd like to turn to item number 1 on today's calendar, Senate Bill 419 on solid waste and home-generated sharps. Senator Simitian, welcome.
Thank you, and my apologies if I've kept the committee waiting. I was down in Natural Resources voting for some very fine assembly bills that I had.
Well, we thank you for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. This is just a follow-up measure to measure that I authored back in 2009, SB 486. That measure simply required that pharmaceutical manufacturers report on an annual basis to the Department of Resources, Recycling and Recovery on what, if anything, they do to help their customers properly manage their sharps that deliver the medication. And again, I want to underscore, there was no mandate about what you had to do. If the answer was we don't do anything, that was fine. If the answer was here's our swell program and we want you to know about it, that was fine. The notion was let's sort of let the market work by providing information to members of the public so they can say, oh, these folks offer a great program, I might like to use that product, as opposed to these folks who aren't able to offer a product for whatever, or a process for whatever reason. The reports are due on an annual basis to the state, with the first round, which was due last July. Second round's due in just a couple of days, literally July the 1st. And in follow-ups with the folks at CalRecycle and the supporters of SB 486, there were just a couple of things that seemed like would be helpful to clean up. The 2 issues are electronic reporting, and to clarify that when a manufacturer posts on their own website, that it be in a way that's readily accessible. And these are small improvements, but I think it will make the previous effort a little bit more effective, and I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Are there members in support of the
Nicole Wortelman on behalf of the Alameda County Board of Supervisors. Alameda County has been a strong advocate for safe needle disposal for the past 10 years, and Senator Simitian's Bill 486 from 2010 helped to inform consumers about how to dispose of their needles or what their particular pharmaceutical manufacturer was doing, and this bill is simply a cleanup of that measure. We're in strong support.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there members of the public who are opposed to the measure? We don't see any.
Mr. Chair, I'll move the bill and I have comment.
Please.
Well, this is a good bill. The bill it's cleaning up was a good bill, but also a modest one. And I want to express, I know, the author's frustration and my own, because I had my own comeuppance when it came to trying to do what really needs to be done with sharps. And it's still shocking to me that the industry hasn't stepped up and figured out how to fully take responsibility for the risks that are created by sharps. And I'm looking forward to that day. In the meantime, I'm glad that you were able to get something before the legislature that at least does the job of informing the public. So,
thanks. And again, Mr. Chair, we've had good bipartisan support on this because it is a sort of a free market solution, which is let consumers make their own judgments, but make sure that the one thing consumers need to make their own judgments, which is complete information, is readily accessible and available.
Is there anybody else in the public in support of the measure? And we do have a motion by Assemblymember Chesbro. Mr. Miller,
Good
second.
afternoon, members. Rosalind Muley on behalf of Waste Management, and we are in strong support of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Luann Hayden, user of sharps for multiple sclerosis, and appreciate your support.
And Lori Chen on behalf of Clean Water Action in support.
Okay. Wonderful. All right, we have a motion and a second. Senator, would you like to close?
You've had a long day. I ask for an aye vote.
Please call the roll.
Wachowski? Aye. Wachowski, aye. Miller? Aye. Miller, aye. Campos? Chesbro?
aye.
Chesbro, aye. Davis? Fuhr? Lowenthal? Aye. Lowenthal, aye. Morale?
Aye.
Morale, aye. Valadeo?
Aye.
Valadeo, aye.
6-0, the motion matter is out. Senator, I would like to indicate that item number 9, the committee bill on Baltic Waters, was on our consent calendar, and we voted on that prior to you coming here, so it's out also.
I'm glad I couldn't gum it up, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Who's here?
It is. It's a chill in the air.
Chair's trying to keep us awake.
As is our new custom, when we don't have any senators, we will pause until a senator arrives.
But as of
Do it. Tell her I want to.
he says
Sign right there.
All right, the committee will come back into session. We will call item number 2, Senate Bill 456 by Senator Huff. Welcome, Senator. This is on household hazardous waste and transportation. It's the matter's been moved and seconded. Senator Huff, yes. Do you accept the suggested language? Okay.
There you go. I have that effect on people. Yes, we do accept the amendments. Thank you very much. You want me to go ahead and make a quick presentation? Well, I know everybody's in a hurry today. California has regulated the public collection of household hazardous waste since 1996. Many communities have now implemented an extremely popular door-to-door collection program, which can be scheduled at the customer's convenience. Other communities are interested in implementing this program, but current restrictions on methods by which household hazardous waste can be transferred add to the cost without providing any additional safety for the public. SB 456 eases onerous and unnecessary restrictions on door-to-door collection programs by codifying an existing program which has been permitted on a case-by-case basis. This is a simple bill, I hate it when people say that, allows business to grow and help the environment, but this one truly is. Bill Anderson, Senior Manager for Waste Management's At Your Door Special Collections, here to testify in support and to answer any questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Bill Anderson. I'm Senior Manager for At Your Door, which is a waste management company. First, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to address you today, and I'd like to start by telling you a little bit about At Your Door. At Your Door was originally named Curbside Inc. and has been operating in California and in several other states since 1996. We serve customers in more than 30 communities in California and 7 states throughout the U.S. We provide our primary services providing door-to-door collection of special waste, which include toxic materials, chemicals, electronics, types of materials that shouldn't be thrown into the trash. The program is designed to provide a convenient and cost-effective method to safely manage residential household hazardous waste and maximize the diversion of these materials from improper disposal or illegal dumping of these environmentally harmful products. We have several state and local agencies which provide regulatory oversight. They include DTSC, which issues a hazardous waste transporter registration to our company. The CHP conducts periodic vehicle inspections. Local fire departments approve the hazardous materials business plans, and CUPAs throughout the state provide and issue permit by rule for the programs to start and inspect the transfer stations and vehicles as well. A local government contracts with At Your Door to provide door-to-door collection for some of the materials we collect. A resident then calls At Your Door and schedules a pickup. On the scheduled pickup day, the resident places the items in a secured bag near their door in front of their garage for the materials which are then offloaded, collected by our vehicle, and then taken to a transfer station for storage, and then transfer to a TSD facility, which is a final treatment facility, within 10 days. We collect on average about 85 pounds of household hazardous waste from homes, and typically these materials in some other states perhaps don't recycle a very high percentage. In California, it can be between 75 and 85% of the materials actually go to recycling, which is a second use for materials that would otherwise be destroyed. I thank you for the opportunity to discuss At Your Door today, and I'm available if you have any questions. Thank you.
All right. Let's hear from the other members in support.
Mr. Chair, members, Justin Malone on behalf of the CUPAs, as we affectionately call them, the local environmental health folks that do the inspections. We want to urge the support of this provision because it really is going to promote the recovery of many of these universal wastes that are often very expensive and difficult to handle at the end of their useful life. So we do see this as a very productive step towards doing that. We would like to thank the sponsor and the author for taking these 2 amendments that we proposed. I believe we have one articulated here, and the second that we asked for may not be necessary, and that is to ensure that these trucks that are carrying these universal wastes are registered with DTSC. It's our understanding from DTSC that they are required by current law, so that addresses that concern. The second issue here is without establishing any new permitting structures, we just wanted to make sure that the local enforcement agency can go and inspect these facilities and make sure that they're safe. So with that, we're happy to support the bill.
All right. Next.
Mr. Chair and members, Denise Duncan with Madison Associates. We're representing Evergreen Oil. They re-recycle and re-refine used oil. We're actually the only re-refiner of used oil in California, and we support this bill.
I know, Newark. Are there other members or of the public who are in support of this measure? Now, I guess the question on these final treatment facilities that's come up is making sure that they're permitted facilities if they're out of state, because it's a possibility that some of the materials can be shipped to a non-permitted facility. Can you address that?
That's actually a very good point. And I have to address it not just from our position, but other companies that might follow these same regulations as they're adopted. When a manifest is created at the point that the material is being collected, the TSD facility or the final treatment facility has to be listed on there. And so it tells all the regulators who can check this material from the point that it's collected through the Highway Patrol and any others, this is where it's going to go. Now, when it reaches that facility, under the law, that facility has to send a copy back to the state of California and to the generator saying this material reached here. Now, those facilities, those TSD facilities, they're usually called Part B facilities, are regulated under federal law. They're very heavily regulated facilities by a number of agencies, from the EPA to air quality, water, a number of other agencies. So if it gets there, it's fairly a secure bet that it's going to be managed properly when it's at that point.
Okay, and I guess one other matter, I believe the Sierra Club has suggested a sunset on the legislation, and I don't know if that was included. I don't see it on the suggested language that we have.
If you must, we're okay with that, but it's not among the suggested ones right now, or among those adopted.
You haven't called for opposition yet, so
no, I'm not. I'll be getting to opposition. I got.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Well, you mentioned the Sierra Club, so that would be happy opposition.
Right. Well, there was a suggestion that we have an 8-year sunset on the bill, and then perhaps at that time, this is a developing area where what we used to think is just waste is now maybe resources that will find useful uses, and there may be the other body of law may progress that we want to be having people registered or what may happen. With that thought, why don't we hear from opposition?
Michael Endicott with Sierra Club California. Thank you, Chair. And I'm hoping it's happy opposition. I won't go into a lot of reasons, and because I'm authorized to go a full jibe all the way from opposed to support if we put in the sunset. I think it helps make sure that the program's running properly. It allows us as Sierra Club not to ask for some other bells and whistles that we think would be necessary to make sure it's a safe program. And as you're saying, we can see what happens with the program. An 8-year sunset gives plenty of time to evaluate it, say in 5 years, and actually make adjustments to it if necessary. So we're opposed, but we're authorized, if the author will take an 8-year sunset, and the committee supports that, to go to support.
Okay. Before we hear from the author, are there other members of the public opposed to the measure? Senator Huff?
If it's the will of the committee, I'd be pleased to take that amendment.
Okay. Oh, all right. All right. Senator, would you like to close?
I ask for your aye vote.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Wachowski?
Aye.
Wachowski, aye. Miller?
Aye.
Miller, aye. Campos? Chesbro?
Aye.
Chesbro, aye. Davis?
Aye.
Davis, aye. Fuhrer? Lowenthal?
Aye.
Lowenthal, aye. Morale?
Aye.
Morale, aye. Valadeo?
Aye.
Valadeo, aye.
7-0. Your matter is out. Congratulations, Senator.
Thank you.
Now we'll move to item number 3, Senate Bill 482 by Senator Kehoe, which moves beach testing program from the Department of Public Health to the Water Board. Senator.
Thank you, Mr.
Good
Chairman.
afternoon.
Good afternoon, members. Thank you for allowing me to present the bill. This bill has to do with our beach monitoring program. And since the passage of AB 411 in 1997, California has had a model beach monitoring program. It has protected thousands, tens of thousands of beachgoers from sickness. Because beaches can be closed by local health officials when high levels of bacterial contamination are present. The Department of Public Health funded the state's share of the program until June of 2008. At that time, funding for the program was eliminated from the state budget. Because the State Water Resources Control Board has been involved in the day-to-day water quality monitoring and testing program under the program, it has been providing state funds as a stopgap measure to keep this important public health program alive. But that funding will end January 1, 2012. We attempt to address this bill by providing that the Water Board will have the tools it needs to keep the program going. Beginning January 1st, 2012, the bill transfers the monitoring and testing responsibilities, which the Water Board has been already doing, from Department of Public Health to the Water Board. With the agreement of the Department of Public Health and the Water Board, DPH would retain the authority over setting the public health standards, but the Water Board would do the testing. By giving the Water Board the monitoring and testing responsibilities in statute, the Water Board will have the authority to secure sustainable funding for the program. It ensures the continuation of the important public health aspects of our monitoring and testing program. It will keep our beachgoers safe. The bill is sponsored by the California Association of Environmental Health Administrators. It's also supported by Sierra Club, Natural Resources Defense Council, California Coastkeeper Alliance, and the County of San Diego, and a number of other county health departments. I would ask for your aye vote. With me is Justin Milan, Executive Director of the California Association of Environmental Health Administrators, and Jonathan Clay, representing the County Board of Supervisors in San Diego. Thank you.
Move the bill.
Second. There's a motion and a second by member of Humboldt County, which has also supported the bill. Mr. Milan, you.
Thank you, sir. Members, Justin Milan on behalf of the local environmental health directors. We're the folks that actually go out every day and monitor the beaches with a little gizmo and come back and report those results to the state. And this is really important. The reason we need some state support, and I want to make it clear that the $980,000 that the state has been providing to local governments for the past 13 years doesn't cover the full program. Local governments are putting their skin in the game. Lots and lots of skin in the game. This really helps them do a couple of things. It helps them be consistent with all their monitoring, and it helps them report to the state so that when you compare beaches, you're all doing the same monitoring, you're comparing apples with apples. So that is the real crucial part of the state assistance that was committed to back when AB 411 was first passed. I think you realize the value of these monitoring programs. They not only ensure that the public is safe, but it protects a huge economic engine in California. If a beach goes down, tourism shuts off. So from both perspectives, the public health and public enjoyment, plus also the economic value of a really what we call budget dust. We're looking for $1 million or $2 out of this deal to keep our beaches healthy and to have the notification. I want to explain quickly before, and unfortunately we still have some opposition, but before the opposition comes up, I need to explain something. We took a series of amendments at the request of CASA. We took a series of amendments that absolutely definitively ensure that there's a nexus. If there were to be funds raised by the Water Board, that there's a nexus between the fees that they raise to fund this program and any real potential of contamination by the pollutants, the MPDS or WDR person. We've written that into the bill so there can be no question that this isn't a Prop 26 fee. There can be absolutely no question that the Water Board's not going out and grabbing money from somebody else's pot. We have a small amount of money that's still needed. If that money isn't provided, and this is the urgency, if the money isn't provided by the State Water Board, we are not going to get these results reported back to the state of California. And 13 years of fantastic work by local governments, NGOs, and the state is going to be for naught. We urge your aye vote.
Thank you. Others in support?
Jonathan Clay on behalf of the County of San Diego in support of the bill.
Are there other members of the public in support of the measure? Please come forward.
Hi, members. Kevin Cook, also representing Sierra Club, California, and we're in support of the bill.
Laura Chen on behalf of Clean Water Action in support.
Thank you. Are there members of the public opposed to the bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Mike Dillon, representing the California Association of Sanitation Agencies. A better description of our position now is concern rather than oppose. Senator Kehoe and her staff, Linda Barr and, and Justin Milan have been very gracious in working with us over 4 or 5 months now on a series of amendments, conference calls, and so forth. Our agencies support beach monitoring, so I want to make that really clear. Our only concern is how high the fees could go. A number of our agencies already contribute to the beach monitoring. I think, as Mr. Milan mentioned, L.A. County Sanitation Districts, Orange County Sanitation Districts, I think they pretty much 100% fund the program. But on top of that, all of our agencies are asked to provide, pay for surface water monitoring, which really has no benefit to ocean dischargers. On top of that, all of our agencies are asked to pay for basin planning, and that fee is on our permit holders, and there's only a remote connection there to our folks. So what I'm essentially saying is the bottom line is our members are just nervous about how high the fees go. If it's $1 million to replace existing funds, then that's acceptable. If it's a little bit more than that, that would be reluctantly acceptable. But if it happens to go to $3, $4, or $5 million, there's no cap or anything on this. So absent a cap or a Scout's honor from Senator Kehoe or Justin, again, we just want to make our point. There is no real limit on the fees. There is a connection with the nexus, but that doesn't say the state board can't go out and increase fees as much as they feel they would need. Our friends at the state board always say, well, we have to do a BCP and we have to go before the budget subcommittees to make our case, but I can tell you, based on 35 years of experience, we lose every time. So anyway, point well made, Mr. Chairman and members. Our major concern has been just the potential for the increased funding and whether or not there's a possibility of some type of a cap or something like that.
Well, the motion is due pass as amended to appropriations. So,
thanks, Mike.
Or due pass to appropriations. Forget I dropped down. So I'm sure they'd like to hear that. Any members of the committee have questions of the author? All right.
I'll just say
Vice Chair Miller.
Yeah, thank you. I just, Senator, I don't think we have any issue on the monitoring. It needs to be done. I know for me, I've got my county, Orange County Sanitation District listed in opposition. I do want to check back with them. I'm going to keep an open mind, but I'm not going to support it right now. But we'll see where it goes. So.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I appreciate the comment. I would just say, and I see the OC Sanitation District is in opposition, but as Mr. Miller said, I think the concern there is cost pressures, the potential for increases. There are no fees in the bill, no increases in fees. This is a realignment of responsibilities. Of course, as Mr. Miller points out, over time, the agencies are going to want to be funded for the work that they do. But I'm sure your coastal cities are going to have a very different point of view. So we'll ask them to look at the bill also.
Okay, thank you.
Well, with the noted concern, would you like to close? Or?
Yeah, I would just ask for your aye vote. I think that there are no fees in the bill, and this is a program that, as Mr. Milan pointed out, has strong economic and environmental aspects and public health aspects to it. I ask for your aye vote.
All right. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mykowski?
Aye.
Mykowski, aye. Miller? No. Miller, no. Campos? Aye. Campos, aye. Chesbro? Aye. Chesbro, aye. Davis?
Aye.
Davis, aye. Fuhrer?
Aye.
Fuhrer, aye. Lowenthal? Aye. Lowenthal, aye. Morale?
No.
Morale, no. Valadeo? Okay. Valadeo, no.
The measure has 6 votes to 3. It's out.
Thank you,
Now-
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members. Appreciate
let's-
it. And Mr. Miller will be in touch, yeah.
Let's turn to item number 6, Senate Bill 623, which is our vessels marine anti-fouling paint. Senator?
Yes, members and Mr. Chairman, again, thank you for allowing me to present this bill. It has to do with copper in hull paints on boats. You may remember last year I authored a new law to phase out copper in brake pads on vehicles on California roads. I did that because copper has been found to be a highly toxic part of our water system. It comes from runoff from our roads and other things, including leaching from vessels. It's highly toxic to aquatic life, and it degrades water quality. And also, our cities and local entities are facing stringent deadlines under the Federal Clean Water Act to reduce copper loading in stormwater discharges, or literally members face millions of dollars in fines or cleanup costs, including building new waste treatment, water treatment facilities. San Diego Bay is ground zero for that effort. The bill is sponsored by our San Diego Unified Port District. This year, this bill, SB 623, deals with another facet of copper, high copper concentrations in marina basins. So where we have recreational vessels moored for long periods of time, the copper leaches out of the hull paint and kills any aquatic life, flora and fauna in the water. In San Diego, the Shelter Island Yacht Basin in my district, and you're probably very familiar with it, you fly over it every time you land at Lindbergh Field, is currently under a 2022 deadline to remove 76% of its copper load. So all of us who have served on local government know how challenging these numbers can be. And again, this is not just San Diego. This is marinas up and down the coast. They're facing increasing pressures to significantly reduce the copper in their water, or they may face fines and cleanup costs as well. Also, copper is highly soluble in water. So the best way of getting copper out of the water is to not let it get in there in the first place. And that's why taking it out of the hull paint is so important. Studies have shown that high concentrations of copper in marina waters are due to the density of recreational vessels in marinas, the lack of the water flushing in those areas, and passive leaching from copper used in the paint to reduce fouling growth. The situation is complicated by the fact that right now we have 2 state agencies in conflict with each other. The Department of Pesticide Regulation, which regulates copper and hull paint, and has allowed the use of copper for years. DPR is going through a reevaluation process, but there is no deadline, and that process is not complete. On the other hand, the Federal Clean Water Act is requiring state and regional agencies and water boards to impose limitations on copper loading in our waters, including harbors and marinas. So the bill would do the following. It requires DPR to determine the maximum allowable leach rate for low leach rate copper hull paint by 2014, January 1st, 2014. It prohibits recreational boat manufacturers from selling recreational vessels with copper hull paint that is not low leach copper paint starting January 1, 2015. So that's the boats that are with the paint already on them. It prohibits California recreational vessel owners from applying new copper hull paint that is not low leach copper hull paint beginning January 1, 2015. And in January 1, 2019, it would create a scientific process for the State Water Resources Control Board to review the use of low leach rate copper paint and determine whether it can attain water quality objectives in marinas within 5 years. If not, the Water Board would be able to ban anti-fouling paint and those paints that contain metals. Members, I know this is a lot of information. It's a complicated subject. If I could just take you down memory lane for about 30 seconds. When I was still in the Assembly, and I'm now in my last 18 months of the Senate, then State Senator Alpert had a meeting at in San Diego on the harbor with recreational users, tenants association, and others. And we heard from the recreational boaters that, well, if you do this to us, we're just going to go to Mexico and get the boats painted there. And Ensenada is a short cruise from San Diego. So that is to emphasize that there are a lot of dynamics in this conversation. It is a complicated issue. We want to have a clear program so that yachts people will know what they're required to do. With me is the San Diego Unified Port District. I'm hoping this bill keeps moving. We have had extensive conversations with recreational boaters, the port, the health officers, and public jurisdictions about how to regulate the copper in the hull paint. This is an important step forward. We need to get this out of the water. That is the bottom line, and we have already been discussing it for years. Now we need some timelines in that conversation to move us toward low leach copper paint and eventually, hopefully, a substitute product that is affordable and environmentally appropriate. So we're still working on some of these details, but I do hope that you will support the bill. It's sponsored by the Port District, as I've mentioned, San Diego Coastkeeper, the Sierra Club, the Coastkeeper Alliance, the National Marine Fisheries Service, and I have with me Jonathan Clay representing the port, and Sarah Amendzada. Close enough, thank you. Representing Coastkeeper and the Coastkeeper Alliance, I ask for your aye vote.
Good afternoon. Jonathan Clay on behalf of the Port of San Diego. We're proud to be one of the co-sponsors of this important measure. The Port of San Diego is charged with balancing environmental stewardship along with also economic development for the harbor in San Diego. I've been working on this issue now through the regulatory process since 2004. We've still not been able to address, as the Senator identified, this catch-22 where you have a product that's allowed for use by one state agency, but then we're having enforcement actions under the Federal Clean Water Act carried out by another agency. And as the port, we're kind of caught in that catch-22 there of how do we deal with this. At the local level, we've been trying to move forward on a number of fronts. We've conducted our own paint studies because since we were essentially the canary in the birdcage with the issuance of the TMDL, the first one in California, we've been looking at different types of alternative paints, their effectiveness, how long they last. We've also received grants from the US EPA to try and conduct incentives to get people to switch away from copper hull paints. We're also even looking at our own police powers in terms of ordinances dealing with signage and in-water hull cleaning. So at the local level, we're trying to pursue all the avenues at our disposal to try and address this problem. As the Senator mentioned, we're facing a reduction of 76% of copper by 2022. Our TMDL for the yacht basin identifies the recreational vessels as contributing 98% of that copper through that passive leaching the Senator mentioned. So we've been working very closely with stakeholders from state agencies, the paint manufacturers, the wreck boaters, the marina operators, the environmental community to try and come up with what we think is a good balance here in terms of dealing with this copper, which is definitely a problem for the environment, balancing that also with the invasive species, because that's the other issue we face in California is sort of foreign critters, clams, other types of things that come from far away that once they settle into California have huge impacts on our water quality, even in our water delivery system. So we're trying to create that balance. If there wasn't a bill, I think the problem for the Port of San Diego is you have the port, the marinas, the boat owners themselves, and the in-water hull cleaners all named in this TMDL. the best and most effective way to address the issue is at the source. If we're left to have to deal with it on the back end, it's going to be a very expensive and probably not a very successful process. In closing, I think we're just asking for the committee's indulgence as we continue negotiations. I think we've made a lot of progress. As you'll notice, the paint manufacturers aren't here today voicing their opposition. We think we're getting close there. We hope to hopefully get some of the other opposition in that same place, and we think we can do that in the next weeks ahead. With that, I close. Thank you.
Other members in support?
Yes, good afternoon, Chair and committee members. My name is Sarah Amanzada, and I'm here today representing San Diego Coastkeeper, the co-sponsor of this bill, as well as the California Coastkeeper Alliance. California Coastkeeper Alliance represents a network of 12 waterkeeper groups who work throughout the state to protect watersheds in California for the benefit of ecosystems and communities. I urge your aye vote today on SB 623. It's good environmental policy, it's good economic policy, and it's good public policy in general. From an environmental perspective, it's critically important that we reduce copper impacts to fish and bottom-dwelling species in harbors and marinas. From an economic perspective, without state action, marinas and harbors in California will be required to implement federally mandated TMDLs to reduce copper in their waters and face significant financial penalties if copper concentrations in their waters are not substantially reduced. And finally, from a public policy perspective, this bill is being vetted. Everyone is at the table. There are good questions being raised in analysis, and those are being addressed. So I urge your aye vote so that this bill can move forward and that good work can continue. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, Bill Kraus representing the Marina Recreation Association, the California Association of Harbor Masters and Port Captains, the California Marine Parks and Harbors Association. Those are the marina, both publicly owned and privately owned marinas associations. The Northern California Marine Association, which are the Northern California boat dealers, California yacht brokers, and the Western Boater Safety Group, which is about 24,000 individual boaters. I'm going to first thank the author for her efforts on this bill. This bill is very different than how it started out. She has looked very carefully at the environmental impacts as well as the impact of the boating community and has done a very good job of balancing those two considerations. We have a position of support if amended. And in fact, we've been in support from the beginning. We get it. Recreational vessels are a large source of the problem, and something needs to be done about it. It's in our interest to solve this problem related to copper that's on the bottom of these million boats out there. And so we get it, and that's why we're supportive of the bill. We have one minor issue left with regard to the sign indicated that the Department of Boat and Waterways would put together. We want to firm that language up a little bit, but that's our one remaining issue. I just want to leave the committee with the message that the boating community gets it, and we are supportive of the direction of the bill.
Thank you.
Michael Endicott with Sierra Club, California, and I appreciate the chair's indulgence. If I could just say one piece about history to go back a little ways also. Copper is an amazing material. It carries our electricity. It carries what we do, our data across our dumb and our smartphones, and in the proper kind of necklace configuration, it can help you win the World Series. And it also helps stop my car. The reason that I mention all this is that it's also, you have to think of it also as a stone cold killer. It doesn't hurt people, but to aquatic species, both the plants that provide food, the small fish that provide food and reproduction, it kills those. That's partly why it's used in the paint, and it's designed to do that. The computer industry stepped up in Silicon Valley, cleaned up its discharge of copper. The brake pad and the automobile companies, with your help, also did that again, and with this author's help. That's why she's so articulate on this issue. She's the right one to be carrying this with this committee, supervising it, of course. And so I just wanted to say we, as sailors and as fishermen, have to step up to the plate and do our piece of it, because copper is so unique in so many ways, and it's so bioavailable you can't capture it afterwards. The only perfect animal that catches it are the bivalves at the bottom that then die from that. So this is a very important bill and a top priority for the club, and it has to happen now because of the TMDL deadlines that they're talking about. And this is actually the most cost-effective way to approach it, and it gives people time to adjust. Thank you very much. We support this bill.
Next, support.
Lori Chen on behalf of Clean Water Action in strong support.
Thank you.
Jennifer Tannehill with Aaron Reed and Associates on behalf of the Southern California Marine Association. We want to thank the author for working with us on the transient vessel issue, and we are now neutral on the bill.
Other members in support or of the public? Are there members of the public in opposition to the measure? Please come forward.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Jack Michael. I'm Vice President of Recreational Boaters of California, which is opposed to SB 623 unless it is further amended. RBOC appreciates the efforts of Senator Keogh, the sponsors and the proponents of SB 623, working with us and others with an interest in this measure, and we will intend to continue those discussions in a good faith effort to resolve our concerns. We acknowledge that SB 623 was amended recently on June 21st. Most significantly, the bill as now amended, would not enact an outright ban on the application of copper-based anti-fouling paints or on the sale of recreational boats with those paints. SB 623 would allow for the application of paints using low-leaching, low-level copper. We also note that paint manufacturer representatives are stating that there will be a variety of available paints prior to this deadline. Available, effective, and affordable paints would be very helpful to boaters. SB 623 was also amended on June 21st to include provisions establishing that sometime after January 1, 2019, a ban on boater application of paints containing copper if the State Water Board determines that trends are not indicating that water quality objectives will be met. We are concerned that such a ban could leave boaters with no options, and that the ban would only apply to recreational vessels. As the committee analysis notes, the bill targets recreational vessels. RBOC is therefore urging that SB 623 be amended to include provisions that A, ensure that any ban on the application of copper-based anti-fouling paints is accompanied by a finding that alternatives are available, affordable, and effective, and B, ensuring that any ban would apply to all vessels that contribute copper to the waterways. We also agree with the points made in the committee analysis that the bill, as currently drafted, leaves several important questions unanswered, and that the bill should provide specificity. These include, 1, specification of the objective of the standard to be utilized by the Department of Pesticide Regulation to determine the maximum allowable leach rate for low leach rate copper anti-fouling paints. 2, that specification of the manner in which the Water Board would determine through assessment of appropriate water quality data and modeling techniques whether the use of low leach rate copper containing anti-fouling paints can result in the attainment of water quality objectives in California marinas and harbors. 3, specification that 2019 ban is just on copper containing anti-fouling paint and not on all anti-fouling paint. And 4, specification of the government agency that would be responsible for enforcement. I thank you for your time. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, with that segue, any other members of the public opposed? I did have an opportunity to speak with Senator Kehoe yesterday over the 8 points that are outlined in the committee report, and although it wasn't, we discussed the issues that were raised. You've indicated this, as the staff report says, and as we've heard today, this is a work in progress. We're trying to, or you're attempting to get a workable model that doesn't put all transient vessels out of business, but also moves us in the direction to reducing the copper content in our waters. Do you have anything you'd like to share with the committee on the? I mean, I'm satisfied. I'll be recommending that we do approve the bill, and if you have further discussion that you'd like to share with members of the committee.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say, first of all, thank you to you, the Vice Chairman of the Recreational Boaters, for being so specific in where you want the bill to go. And I would just point out to the committee members and the chairman that in addition to the recreational boaters, there are the paint manufacturers, the public agencies, the environmental community, other kinds of boat commercial boat port tenants that all have specific detailed responses to the bill. That's why we ask to make sure that we can continue this conversation. It is not, it needs to be worked out over time, just like the brake pad bill was, which actually came to the legislature after years of discussion outside the building. So I can't really respond point by point to the vice chairman's concerns, but those are the things that we want to work out. The deadlines have slid around a little bit already. We are flexible on those things. We want to get to the goal. We're not trying to be punitive. The idea is to meet the federal deadlines, but not to unnecessarily infringe on the pleasure boaters' ability to enjoy their vessels and cruise around or stay moored for weeks or months at a time. I would like Mr. Clay to respond to some of the more technical issues. Transient vessels, recreational vessels, and non-commercial vessels are all different things, and they're covered by different parts of the law. He can speak to that better than me, and a little bit more on the total managed daily loads. If you don't mind.
Go ahead.
In terms of the point that was raised about focusing strictly on just the recreational vessels, part of that was a lengthy kind of process in terms of educating ourselves on what are the issues, both with as it relates to copper hull paint for wreck vessels, larger vessels, commercial, big shippers, and balancing, as I mentioned in my testimony, the whole concept of invasive species. In working with the State Water Board, the problem has, with the TMDLs and this copper loading, has been predominantly with recreational boat marinas. When you look at the TMDLs, they're all targeted at recreational boat marinas. Also, the larger ships that fall under the general vessel permit already have regulations as it relates to in-water hull cleaning because of those copper concerns. Those vessels are also covered under that regulatory scheme. So if at some point there is a solution that deals with invasive species, the State Water Board, under the authority of the federal government, can come back and make changes to that permit. The wreck vessels were not covered under any type of permit process at the State Board. So we felt since they're the identified problem, they're outside of the already existing permit scheme at the State Board, that was going to be the primary focus for our bill. And so I think I can leave it at that. If there's questions, we can go into some more detail there as well.
Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Long Beach, another port.
Yes, that's exactly why I want to say something.
Sure.
I really appreciate your bill, Senator, and the years that it's taken to work on the issue, because my district is so similar to yours. Mm-hmm. We have ports, we have numerous marinas, and we're always working on the water quality. I was completely unaware of this problem until you brought it up, and I'm happy that you're addressing it. Hope that in the future I can be helpful. But I do want to say to the recreational boat owners and business owners that change is very difficult. It's very hard for people, for the paint companies to change their business model and search for something that's going to be acceptable to everyone. It sort of reminds me of cleaning the air around the ports and the marinas, and how we've had to move to a new kind of plan and electric vehicles in order to do so. So the transition is hard, but the goal is really worthy, and I appreciate what you're trying to do.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, I just kind of feel like we're reliving the brake pad a little bit, but I'm trying to sort through a couple comments and just get some more information. I heard a statement, 1 million boats out there, and I don't know if that was just in jest, or and of course Stone Cold Killer, with no disrespect to my friend at the Sierra Club, but I guess, like, what is the replacement product? Like we had the same issue with the brake pads, where the industry came in and said, okay, we don't necessarily have an adequate product to replace the copper and the brake pads that would meet safety requirements, and I understand this is not necessarily as serious of a safety issue as brake pads, but what would the replacement product be? Is it out there? I understand we have to meet these mandates that are out in the future, but isn't this only, this would be like a recreational boat that is made out of a wooden hull, not necessarily a fiberglass hull. Aren't most of the recreational boats out there, frankly, a fiberglass hull that doesn't have a paint, any type of paint on it that would be used? And that kind of leads me to my next question: is like, what is the measurement? I really haven't heard anything about what is the measurement of the seriousness of the problem. I'm not disputing the fact that there's copper leaching or the fact that there is naturally copper in the water stream, either coming down from the rivers coming into the ocean, that there would be some naturally occurring copper. But to what degree is it having an impact? Are the fish and fauna floating to the top all over the place where it's surrounding a wooden hull boat that's painted with a copper-based paint? Some of this just is not making sense to me, and I question it not because we want clean water, but if we don't have a replacement product and we don't really know the nature and the seriousness of the problem, and we're kind of using some scare tactics, phrases to scare people into doing this, I'm concerned, because that's really not good public policy. That's approaching it from a method that I don't think is fair to the public. So I would just throw some of those ideas out. It's going to be hard to support the bill today, but if you can try and answer some of those, I'd appreciate it.
If you don't mind,
Yeah.
Mr. Clay answer.
Yeah.
Again, Jonathan Clay on behalf of the Port of San Diego. In terms of the first part of the question, in terms of what type of products are out there, in working with the paint manufacturers, you'll see the bill's transitioned away from an outright ban to what's now called this low leach standard. So the paint manufacturers have said that they can produce a product that releases much smaller amounts of this copper. So essentially the best way to think about it is it's going to release the bare amount that is needed to keep the critters from attaching to the side of the boat, which then ultimately reduces the amount of copper that ends up in the water. The paint manufacturers have said that they already have some of these products on the market today. So we thought that was a good compromise in terms of trying to move forward. From the port's perspective, as we've been doing our study over the last few years in San Diego, we've actually looked at alternative paints, is what we're calling them, which are paints that don't contain a biocide but work in a different manner, where you basically put a coating on that's very slick, that either makes it very easy to clean the boat, or when the boat moves, actually the critters and the things that attach actually slough off. Some of the concerns that have been with these alternative paints is that they're high initial costs, but as we've shown in the study, when you look at the lifespan of the product, so if you take the entire lifespan, we actually think that those products are cost effective as it relates to copper, and that's part of the ongoing study that's been going on at the Port of San Diego. So to answer your question, there are both traditional products that use some type of biocide that are available and on the market, and we think will be just as effective and will have the benefit of reducing copper in the water column. But then there's also these alternative products that are different in that they don't contain a biocide but approach the problem a little bit differently, but makes it easy, protects the boat hull, whether it's fiberglass or wood or whatever, but allows for much easier cleaning or for removing the species. In terms of the problem, I think I have to defer to Sierra Club on the levels of what kills what certain types of species, but taking it up to the 50,000-foot level, from the Port of San Diego's perspective, we've been deemed out of compliance with the Federal Clean Water Act, and there's no getting around that. We've tried, we argued our case before the regional board, the TMDL was issued, so we're now facing, the problem is very clearly defined for us in terms of a threshold that we have to meet. And from the port's perspective, because we've actually been looking at this when the original listing was made in 1996, how do we try and get at this problem? if you don't go after the source or don't try and do something on a much broader scale, there's really no way that we're going to be able to effectively solve this at the local level. So we're not trying to use scare tactics. From the port's perspective, we're one of the agencies that's on the hook if we're not able to do this, and there's not much that we have in terms of a power to basically upend the Federal Clean Water Act. I hope that kind of gets somewhat at the problem.
And I appreciate that, and I understand from working on the brake pad bill that these are issues that the area is dealing with and needs to deal with. Again, I mean, is it just me? But is it not? Is it only all boats are using this type of paint? But to me, growing up as a kid, I had a mahogany. Yeah. I had a mahogany boat. That we used to have to varnish every spring after the winter season and strip it and revarnish it. Are there that many wooden hull boats? And again, going back to what is naturally occurring in the water, how do you? And maybe the Sierra Club has the answer to that because it's naturally occurring. What is caused by a very limited number of boats that are of wooden hull nature compared to what's occurring.
So most boats that actually sit in the water 24/7 that are actually, so you probably pulled your boat out of the water and you probably didn't have some type of paint on it. But if a boat's actually sitting in the water for long periods of time, they'll have some type of paint on the hull to protect it from these.
Even if it's fiberglass.
Even if it's fiberglass, even if it's steel, it doesn't really deal with the material itself. It's more of, I'd say, and I defer to the boaters or other folks, but it's more of a way to keep these things from growing and attaching to the side of the vessels.
How many are in San Diego Bay?
There's at least 2,200, I believe, that are impacted by the TMDL in the yacht basin alone. And on that point, as to the question about what's occurring naturally, the San Diego Yacht Basin has the TMDL issued against it is kind of unique in nature in that there's only one stormwater inlet. There's not a lot of other inputs coming into it, so it was very easy for them to determine what's coming from the boats themselves. And as I mentioned in my testimony, 98% of that leaching, as determined by the regional board, is from the paint itself. So you go to other areas, there's going to be a different mix, but in San Diego, it's very clear that this leaching is coming from those boat holes. And our understanding now is it's not just San Diego that's facing this problem. There's at least 2 other TMDLs in the works that are going to cover 30 other marinas. So this is just a problem that the TMDLs are very expensive to do, and so the water board's been slow in putting these out, but unfortunately other areas are going to get to enjoy the fun that we were having down in San Diego. I hope that answers your questions.
10 seconds for the chair. Sorry. Just to say, the reference to the Stone Cold Killer was partly in a little bit of humor and to say that we recognize that this is actually used for that purpose, to actually kill the algae, keep the bivalves from growing on your vessel. And yes, actually, they do use it on fiberglass vessels. So for racing purposes, you want it to be as smooth as possible, et cetera. The blue paint comes off. But I just wanted to say, it's not to drag it out. This is actually a good compromise, and we're trying not to put it all on the backs of the brake pad people, on the backs of the computer people. Everybody has to contribute something into this aspect of it, because it's actually getting to the level where it's affecting the wildlife that serves as the basis for our fisheries out there. So it's not that the fish is turning up dead at that instant around a particular boat. Thank you.
Well, I encourage the author and the
denuded, isn't it?
That's. I encourage the author to continue the work on this. If you're successful, there has been a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Markowski?
Aye.
Markowski, aye. Miller? Campos? Campos, aye. Chesbro? Davis?
Aye.
Davis, aye. Fuhrer?
Aye.
Fuhrer, aye. Lowenthal?
Aye.
Lowenthal, aye. Morel? Valadeo?
You have 5 votes in favor. It's out. Good luck in appropriations.
Thank you, members, and thank you for the discussion.
We'll move to item number 7, Senate Bill 646 by Senator Pavley, which is a technical enforcement cleanup bill regarding lead in jewelry.
How you doing, Senator?
Two mics.
Yes.
You guys all sit together? Mike?
Sometimes whenever I can catch up with the other Mike.
Travel together for protection.
That's right.
Try to be out around 3:15 Mike, so I have leftover.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. That explains a lot.
Okay.
They're nice mics, too.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Like I said, that explains a lot.
Knowing that we have a big budget vote coming up. Good afternoon, Senator. Welcome to Environmental Safety and Toxic Material. You have Senate Bill 646, so please proceed.
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted to first start off and thank your staff for their help with technical amendments that we received from DTSC, and that's why we postponed this for about 1 week, so thank you very much for your assistance. This bill, members, simply closes an enforcement loophole in California's lead-containing jewelry law. It needs to be closed in order to protect public health. I authored the original law, and that's why I have an interest in closing this loophole. I have several interests, but one of them is it was an unintended consequence of the passage of AB 1681 back in 2006 that established, I think it was one of the first bans on lead and jewelry sold right here in California. And one advantage to being around legislature enough years, you can actually go back and sort of monitor bills you've passed and see how they've been implemented, because sometimes they aren't being implemented, or two, they really didn't get at what you thought was the goal of the bill. So we created a loophole here, and I don't need to tell this committee that lead is a very dangerous neurotoxin, so we won't go into the rationale of why we need to reduce exposure of lead, and particularly to children who are very susceptible to it. The original bill was codified into law under the terms of a negotiated amended consent judgment between plaintiffs. It was a Prop 65 lawsuit filed by the AG's office. And I essentially took the terms of the settlement agreement and put them into my lead standard jewelry bill. But now we fast forward, we've got 4 years of data, and we created inadvertently an open-ended loophole in the original law through that codification. We now allow almost 240 companies to bypass statutory enforcement by DTSC and pay no fines. Since 2007, the AG's office has issued over 100 what we call notice of violations, NOVs, for companies that are selling jewelry that exceed our lead standard limit that's in the bill. Unfortunately, most of those notice of violations are by repeat offenders. Over 24 companies received 83 of the 101 NOVs. These repeat offenders pay little or no fines and have no financial incentive to comply with the law. They essentially, when caught, are investigated and found to be selling lead-based jewelry that exceeds the limit. They can write a letter saying that that won't occur again, and they're sort of off the hook. But there's no limit on how many times they can be sort of reprimanded, if you will, and no consequences financially or any kind of deterrent. And in fact, this month, Kamala Harris filed a notice of violations against Burlington Coat Factory, who was selling all this lead-contaminated jewelry that exceeded, that was as high as 75% lead in the clasps and things like that. 2 cases, same company, but this is not the first time. This is the 4th time they have been filed with notice. Probably too much lead in the microphone. Anyway, this loophole law is not working. The point of this bill is to close that loophole, put everyone on a level playing field. Smaller businesses who weren't part of the consent decree, they have enforcement provisions and being fined by DTSC. Other companies, 240 of them, have this sort of get out of jail free card, so to speak. And the saddest part about it is a high percentage, over half of them are repeat offenders over and over again, and it's not acceptable. I ask for your aye vote.
Well, thank you. There is a motion and a second. Are there members of the public in support of the legislation?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, Pedro Morillas from the California Public Interest Research Group, in strong support of the bill. Lead has no business being in products intended for children, and we've understood the dangers posed by lead for decades. We've limited its use in everything from paint and gasoline to toys and clothing. The current limitation is the loophole in the current limitations is undermining the effectiveness of the original bill. And so in terms of reducing the instances of lead turning up in jewelry intended for children, we urge your support of this bill and to get the lead out of the kids' jewelry. Thank you.
Bill Alio for the Environmental Working Group. We support the bill. Sunday night I was out seeing some music with my 5-year-old daughter, and she couldn't keep this necklace thing, locket, out of her mouth. I said like 3 times, take it out of your mouth, and then I'd be thinking, it could have lead in it. I don't know. Do I need to get a lead testing kit? This bill will help make sure that there's no dangerous lead in my daughter's jewelry. Thank you.
Other members of the public in support of Senate Bill 646?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members. I'm Zoe Lidstrom with the Planning and Conservation League in support of this bill.
And Lori Chan, on behalf of Clean Water Action, we really appreciate Senator Pavley's persistence in protecting us.
Kevin Cook, representing Sierra Club, California, and we're in support of the bill.
Thank you. I don't see any opposition on file. Is there any members of the public opposed to the bill? Thank you. Not seeing any. Are there members of the committee who have questions of the author? Then, Senator, I'll ask you to close.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your support in closing this loophole on behalf of children's safety. Ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please call the roll.
Wachowski?
Aye.
Wachowski, aye. Miller? Campos? Campos, aye. Chesbro? Davis?
Aye.
Davis, aye. Pure? Pure, aye. Lowenthal? Lowenthal, aye. Morrell? Valadeo?
Aye.
Valadeo, aye. Chesbro? That's the Pavley bill, 646.
You
Chesbro,
want
aye.
more lead in jewelry.
Senator, you have 7 votes. Your matter moves on to appropriations.
Thank
Good luck. Our last matter is number 8, Senate Bill 900 by Senator Steinberg. I'm going to have to turn over the hearing to the vice chair, since I have 2 bills in the Senate Judiciary Committee that I need to address. But I want to let the committee know that I've struggled a little bit with SB 900. I think we all agree that reforms are needed in the regional water board system. I think everyone, including the water board, recognizes that, which is why the water board has come out with the Water Quality Improvement Initiative a couple of years ago. Because reforms are needed, I'm going to support the bill today, but I'm going to be more than curious to see what the bill looks like following the amendments on the floor, and I'm going to reserve the right to not support the bill depending on the final product. I'll point out that one of the bills I'm testifying on now is another Water Quality Improvement Initiative, SB 246, which some of you may remember. It was the streamlined enforcement, and it's supported by the District Attorneys Association and Attorney General Harris. If the legislature is going to seek reforms to the regional board system, I think we need to include a broad set of issues. I certainly intend to continue working on reforms and that will improve water quality, and look forward to discussing additional legislative proposals in the coming years. With those stated reservations, I understand Mr. Steinberg's staff is here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kip Lipper on behalf of Senator Steinberg, who would associate himself with all of the remarks you just delivered.
Okay. Mr. Lipper, please proceed.
Mr. Chairman and members, SB 900 is a bill that, subject to approval by the United States EPA, would allow the Regional Water Board members to serve on regional boards if they have received more than 10% of their income from parties not subject to the regional board's jurisdiction. Under current law, there are 9 regional water quality control boards consisting of 9 appointees, several of whom have designated positions. So, for example, irrigated agriculture, local government, city and county, and so forth, for a total of 81 different water quality regulators in the state. The change in law proposed by this bill is intended to allow parties who are otherwise qualified under the law to serve on the regional water boards, provided the U.S. EPA agrees that it is permissible for them to do so, having derived income from entities not within their jurisdiction, but within the jurisdiction of other regional water quality control boards. The bill has generally strong support from Western growers and others, and Senator Steinberg would ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Mr. Lipper. Appreciate
Thank you.
Any witnesses in support?
Gail Delahunt, Western Growers Association. Our members grow, pack, and ship about 50% of the nation's fresh fruits, vegetables, and tree nuts. Some of our growers do have NPDES permits because they are processing. This only addresses a small amount of people who would be eligible to serve on boards, but it is a small step in trying to fix the regional boards, and we would ask for your support.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. Members, Danny Merkley with the California Farm Bureau, also in support.
Good afternoon. Kathy Cole with the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, in support.
Mr. Chair, members, Crystal Jack on behalf of the Alliance of Western Milk Producers, California Citrus Mutual, California Grape and Tree Fruit League, California Cotton Ginners and Growers Associations, California Rice Industry Association, California Rice Commission, Nisei Farmers League, Western Agricultural Processors Association, and the Western Plant Health Association, all in support.
Valerie Nera for the California Chamber of Commerce. We're also in support.
Tim Schmelzer representing Wine Institute, in support.
And John Larea with the California League of Food Processors, in support.
Great, thank you. Any additional witnesses in support? If not, any witnesses opposed?
We're the last of the support category.
Oh.
California Forestry Association, Anthony Thomas, in support.
You snuck in there.
Yeah.
Committee members, my name is Jim Metropolis with the Sierra Club. We are opposed to the bill in print. We've had conversations with the author's staff and the sponsor who have pledged to work with us should the bill get out of committee. The Sierra Club is willing to work with the author and the sponsor on this issue, and if that includes wholesale reform of the regional water boards, we would certainly like to have that discussion. But as to the bill in print, we are opposed to it.
Good afternoon again, committee members. My name is Sarah Manzada, and I'm representing the California Coastkeeper Alliance. We also oppose this bill in print. We feel that it would weaken protections against the conflict of interest set by the Porter-Cologne Water Quality Control Act without doing anything to fill board seats with qualified members. However, while we oppose the language of SB 900 as proposed, we welcome the opportunity to continue to discuss reforms that would help ensure full boards. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional witnesses? And then Ms. Lowenthal.
Lori Chen on behalf of Clean Water Action. We've also signed on in opposition.
Thank you. Ms. Lowenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. It sounds as though there's opportunity to come together and talk about a more comprehensive policy for filling positions on water boards. Is that correct? And my question is, what was the problem that brought this to the pro tem initially? What was happening out there?
Assemblymember Lowenthal, the basic issue here is that we have a water quality regulatory system that is, while very diverse, has a large number of appointees to a number of boards throughout the state, where they are already subject to the same conflict of interest requirements that you all are as legislators, but there are additional federal requirements, the so-called 10% rule, that this bill deals with, as well as additional requirements for board members who can serve on a board but have to recuse themselves from voting under the Port of Cologne Water Quality Control Act. And so the complexity of those various conflict of interest requirements makes it hard to find qualified regional water quality control board appointees who are willing to serve on these boards for the very minimal salaries and the huge amounts of time that are required. Senator Steinberg started with this bill, sponsored by the Western Growers and others, to try to apply essentially the same conflict of interest requirements that currently apply to legislators and other regulators, I might say, in state government under the Political Reform Act. The Senate Environmental Quality Committee asked us to scale the bill back so that it now deals with this one relatively narrow issue, as the sponsor mentioned, which is, are board members barred completely? This isn't about whether they can vote on issues, but are they barred from even serving on regional water quality control boards if they derive a portion of their income from entities that are not located within their region? So that's what the current bill does. And being very honest with the committee members, and I think the chair, if I caught the tail end of his statement, the issue here is the administration and the sponsor of this bill and the Sierra Club and others all agree that the current system needs some fixing. We have a bill before the committee today, and I know you all are dealing with the same problem, due to the time pressures and the deadlines, that deals with one narrow aspect of that. And I think Senator Steinberg's view is if the parties can come to agreement around a broader set of reforms, and this bill can be used as a vehicle for that, he would bring it back to this committee for full review, just as if it was a new bill, and move forward with it.
I move the bill.
Thank you.
Okay, there is a motion. Is there a second? Mr. Chesbro, there is Republican support for the bill. Ms. Kipper, I guess I would take that as your close, unless you would want to add anything specific. Okay?
No, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recommendation is to do pass to appropriate.
Do pass to the floor.
To the floor. Okay. All right. Thank you. Call the roll.
Wachowski? Miller?
Aye.
Miller, aye. Campos?
Aye.
Campos, aye. Chesbro? Aye. Chesbro, aye. Davis? Fear? Aye. Fear, aye. Lowenthal?
Aye.
Lowenthal, aye. Morrell? Valadeo?
Aye.
Valadeo, aye. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
6-0. Bill is out.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Chairman
you.
and committee.
And we will leave the roll call open for 5 minutes to allow members to add on.
Mr. Chesbro?